Hello and welcome to the Futures 3D video training series. My name is Jeff Christiana and this is video number 9 of the Skeinforge 47 video series on how to use dimension. So under craft, dimension, activate dimension is checked. I recommend that it should be checked. The definition of the absolute extrusion distance is when selected, the extrusion distance output will be the total extrusion distance to that G-code line. Every G-code line, and maybe we can see that here, has a feed rate and over time. So you're going to extrude 5.399 over 1200. So every line has a feed rate in total extrusion time. So, which is really handy because if you lose connection with your printer and it only sends this last G code, it's only going to run until it runs out on this line or how much is actually in the buffer. In previous, the F and the E were not there. It was only your coordinates. So if your computer lost connection with your printer, it would just sit there and just dump and dump and dump, and if you weren't in the room, you weren't watching it, you'd come back to a huge blob that has probably engulfed your whole print tip and has caused a lot of damage. So this has been a great improvement. Also, it changes your speed and changes every layer can be different. You know, how fast it's going to extrude, how fast, you know, how much it's going to, for how long, and how fast in the given area. So it's very handy. The relative extrusion distance, which we don't, it's either one or the other, and you want to use absolute. The relative, when selected, the extrusion distance output will be the extrusion distance from the last G-code line. So let's continue down. The extrusion retraction speed. Now, it says here that a high value will allow the retraction operation to complete before much material oozes out. If your extruder can handle it, this value should be much larger than your feed rate. So if your feed rate is a rate of 48, then your extruder retraction speed should be 150. Now, I haven't had any issues with 13.3. This is a default value, and I'd say the retraction is just perfect. I get no strands at all anymore with this new Skeinforge version, so I'm happy with this setting, and I'm going to leave this setting. But if you want to experiment with this, you definitely can go ahead and do that. Filament diameter, 1.82. My filament is 3, because I use 3mm filament. I have not had any problem using 3mm filament with this 1.82. I have never made adjustments to this. This filament packing density, 0.85, says that it's for ABS. It works just fine for me for PLA. I would recommend just leaving these values or going in and making the changes and just see what happens when you print. And I'll probably do that later on. I haven't had a whole lot of time to make these changes, but my prints come out great and I've been happy with everything so far. So that's what the filament packaging density is. The explanation for the filament packing density, which might be interesting. The default value is so low for ABS because ABS is relatively soft, and with a pinch wheel extruder, the teeth of the pinch dig in farther, so it sees a smaller effective diameter. With a hard plastic like PLA, the teeth of the pinch wheel don't dig in as far, so it sees a larger effective diameter, so feeds faster. So for PLA, the value should be around 0.97, and for ABS, it should be around 0.85. but I really haven't seen a need to change that, so I'm just going to go ahead and leave it for my prints. Maximum E value. Now the maximum E value, which is your flow, your extruder, is set to this number. Now there's no explanation for the maximum E value, so this must be a new setting, and there's no explanation, so I'm just going to leave that as default, and I will update the video when I find out more information. Same thing with the minimum travel for reaction. So I'm just going to leave that empty for right now until I figure out what exactly that means. Now the retract within the island, when this is selected, the retraction will work even when the next thread is in the same island. If it's not selected, retraction will only work when crossing a boundary. So if you're within the circle here and it needs to move from here to here, it will retract the filament up into itself and then move and then start to print again. So if this is checked and it stays within the same island, it will actually retract when doing things when it doesn't need to. So until leaving this unchecked, it will only retract when moving from one spot to another or from one object to another. So leaving this unchecked will save you time, and there's really no need to retract when you're inside your same island. And this retraction distance, this defines the amount the extruder retracts when it will basically suck back into the extruder filament. So this 0.5 has been working fine, and so I would recommend leaving it at that. If you want to retract more, you can increase the number. Restart extra distance millimeters. This is the restart. Basically defines the restart extra difference when the thread restarts. The restart distance will be the retraction distance plus the restart extra distance. If this is greater than 0, when the extruder starts, this distance is added to the retract value, giving extra filament. It can be a negative value, in which case it is subtracted from the retraction distance. On some ripstrap machines, a negative value can stop the build up of plastic that can occur at the start of perimeters. So we're using a negative value with our printer, and that has worked just fine. Not any reason to change that. So if you want to learn more about this, just click the question mark, maybe do some Google searches and really dig into this. But mainly dimension, don't really go in here, don't really do anything with it. I definitely want to go in and play with this filament setting, but in doing that, I'm sure it's going to change all the rest of my settings under my speed as far as how it behaves. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave this as is, and we'll see you in the next video.